All right. Next game we're talking about is my alma mater, but they're not the story here, Dawn. That's because Miami is traveling to Syracuse for a 3:30 p.m. Eastern Time game on ESPN. Playoff implications are interesting because, you win this game if you're Miami and you clinch a spot in the ACC title game against SMU. If you lose this game, you're not going to the ACC title game, and Clemson will be going in your place against SMU. Do you think if Miami loses and they finish the year at 10-2, that they would still get an at-large spot over a 9-3 team like Alabama, or do you think all of a sudden the Hurricanes are in big trouble there?
Where were they ranked? Where are they ranked just now? I was just going to look at it. They're at 9, is it? Right now?
I think they're a little higher than that.
And tonight, because Bama lost in front of them, they're going to be so close. It certainly won't help their case if they were to lose.
They're 8 in the AP poll right now. Which is not the playoff ranking, but it's like this kind of around where it usually
it's somewhere
in
there. They'll be like 7 or 8 in these. Oh, it's so close. I think. Well, my guess is I think they'll be 7.
Okay,
I'm pretty sure because Indiana losing and Alabama losing.
And this is the AP ranking this week,
right?
Yeah.
Man, they'll be 7 or 8. They would another team. If they lose this game, it'd be extremely borderline. I think they would have a better case if they were to win this one, and then if they lost to SMU in the conference title game,
11-2 they'd be in. I
think 11-2 would get them in, but this is a game you don't want to mess around and lose because again, there's going to be non-SEC teams that are 10-2 sitting right on the fence, and there's going to be 9-3 teams in the SEC that are on the fence, and we're going to be sitting here debating all of them for very few hours, actually, when you think about the final Saturday next week versus then turning around at noon the next Sunday and watching the selection process. But no, I think this has to be considered a must-win.
Because what's their best win? Like Florida then is probably their best win of the season.
The Florida game,
Louisville
too, but then they turned around and lost to Stanford. That's familiar, isn't it? And then again, you look at their 2 losses. If that were the case, Georgia Tech and Syracuse. Syracuse would be what, 8-4 or
8-4? Yeah,
8-4, and Georgia Tech.
No, I'm sorry, that'd be 9-3 if they win this game.
9-3, Syracuse.
I know
That'd be a good year for Syracuse.
It would be a great year for Syracuse.
But you'd be
playoff team Syracuse. I don't know.
You'd be putting yourself on the fence here if you're a 10-2 Miami team. I think 11-2 they might be a little safer because SMU is really good. But this is a dangerous one when you talk about it. I don't know. That's a tough one.
I think if both SMU and Miami win, I think they're both in the playoff.
I could reason with that. I don't hate that.
Yeah, I don't think a committee would punish them for losing a conference title game. I think so,
and they shouldn't. They're 2 really good football teams.
It's a really, if you want to guarantee your spot in the playoff, win this game, and then no matter what happens in the ACC title game, obviously you want the first round bye, but no matter what happens, you should be in the playoff regardless. But if you lose this game and you're 10-2 and you're fighting with some other SEC teams that are 9-3, I don't know how that would go. I really don't know how that would go. So
we'd all be screaming at each other on that Sunday.
It would be a nightmare on X. It would be. But Dawn, you have the Miami offense in this game with Cam Ward, who is not a Maxwell Award finalist, by the way, which I have a Maxwell vote. I voted for Cam Ward. I would say that right now. He was in my top 3. Not a Maxwell Award finalist. He is a Davey O'Brien Award finalist, though. So as one of the best quarterbacks in America, and I would argue he maybe should win the Davey O'Brien Award this year. So what should we be looking out for when he and the Miami offense go against the Syracuse defense?
Can I be honest with you for a second?
Yeah.
I hate this matchup for Syracuse.
I don't like it either.
I'm not a big fan. I've got 3 reasons. Okay. 1, they don't blitz very much. 12th lowest blitz rate in the country. And if you give Cam Ward time, we know what happens. Cam Ward on plays that last longer than 2.5 seconds, 91.3 overall grade, 3rd best in the country. Syracuse coverage, which overall the coverage has not been great on the back end for Syracuse.
102nd in the country in coverage grade. Right?
Yeah, when plays go longer than 2.5 seconds, they're 116th. That's 1. 2, very much struggle to defend in the slot. And you know what's on the other side in the slot there, and that's Xavier Restrepo. And
the boogeyman.
Literally, Miami's all-time leading receiver, by the way, much respect. Leads the Power 4 with 894 slot receiving yards and a slot receiving grade of 85.1. That's in the top 10. Okay. Syracuse, 94th in the country in slot coverage grade. 22 explosive catches from slot receivers against Syracuse this year. With as much zone defense as they run, especially cover 3. Syracuse, one of the heaviest cover 3 teams in the country. This chart right here, this is against single high defenses, Xavier Restrepo, okay? And he's not near the top of the nation in targets. He's just so darned efficient. 3rd in the Power 4 in receiving yards against single high coverages. 1st in explosive receptions. 87.1 receiving grade is 3rd. If you play single high against Miami, he is going to find the space in it. And I'm very much worried about this matchup, especially since he's in the slot on 90% of his routes. He is arguably the best slot receiver in the country. I think even for this upcoming draft, I think he's a top 50 player. I would take him in the second round tomorrow. He's as good a football IQ as any receiver in the country, a terrific route runner, great hands, super tough. I think everything about Xavier Restrepo is a horrible matchup for Syracuse. I'm just being honest with you. I'm watching their secondary and saying, I'm like, okay, I watched probably 5 or 6 games of their secondary last night because this is what I do.
Yeah.
And I'm just watching them, and some of the plays, the explosives especially, they gave up, and I go, Xavier Restrepo's coming down the pipe.
Yeah.
I don't like this at all. I got to be honest with you. I really had this thought. And look, we know if Syracuse is going to win, it's going to be a high-scoring game anyway. I got the same feeling I did when we previewed Miami-Louisville. I was like, there's going to be some points in this game.
Yeah.
And there's points in every Miami game, but I'm especially worried about this to the point where, look, Restrepo, his season high in yards is 163 this year. I actually wouldn't be shocked if he broke that. If he had a new season high this year, I'm telling you right now, this is an awful matchup with Restrepo against as much single high coverage and as much as Syracuse has struggled to defend in the slot this season. I'm extremely worried for their secondary.
It's just so disappointing as a Syracuse alum and Syracuse fan, obviously, when, going into the year, I would say the secondary is one of the biggest strengths of the entire team.
Good
right?
players back
Justin
there.
Barron, Deuce Chestnut they have back there, and Fran Brown was the defensive backs coach at Georgia, and he comes into Syracuse, and now all of a sudden that we thought was the biggest strength of the team, it's been one of the biggest weaknesses of the team right now, the secondary. So it's been kind of disappointing. Obviously, a lot of other things have gone really well for Syracuse this year. It's why they're 8-3, which for Syracuse is a great record, honestly. But at the same time, the secondary has been one of the most disappointing parts, I think, of the team this year. One of the most impressive parts of the team, though, Dawn, has been Kyle McCord and this group of pass catchers, though. And my matchup to watch is, all right, can Syracuse's offensive line hold up enough to give McCord and his playmakers a chance out there? Because right now, the Orange are 18th in EPA per pass, tied for 9th in America in receiving grade, and Kyle McCord actually leads the nation in passing yards with 3,924, and he leads the Power 4 with 27 big-time throws. So we're all talking about how Cam Ward, Davey O'Brien award winner, I would agree with that, but Kyle McCord actually leads the nation in passing yards.
He's the ripcord.
He is the ripcord. Yeah, absolutely this year. The one area, though, where Syracuse's passing game has had some issues is along the offensive line. Right now, they're 50th in pass blocking grade this year at 73.6. So not terrible, but it's about average in college football. So they're 25th in pressure rate allowed at 25%. And you're wondering, okay, how are they top 25 in pressure rate allowed, but 50th in pass blocking grade? Well, I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that Kyle McCord gets rid of the football very fast. He has the 9th fastest average time to throw in the nation at 2.4 seconds, 2.41 to be exact. He'll likely need to continue to do that against Miami. Right now, their defensive line is 4th in grade as a unit, 87.8. Only Ole Miss and Michigan have a higher grade in the Power 4 among defensive lines. Miami has gotten a pressure on over 40% of opposing dropbacks, the 5th highest rate in the country as well. If Syracuse's offensive line holds up against this elite Miami defensive line, there is an opportunity for Kyle McCord and all these pass catchers to make some big plays down the field. Because we've seen before, Dalton, even that Louisville game, Miami's secondary is vulnerable out there. Right now, since week 4, Miami is 87th in coverage grade. But if the defensive line dominates, then all of a sudden, in like the Pitt game where it's like, okay, well, McCord's under pressure every single time, throwing interception after interception, then you can see an ugly performance from Syracuse's offense. But if they give McCord time back there, then I think there's an avenue for Syracuse to maybe keep up a little bit with Miami in a potential shootout.
Miami's back 7 in coverage is by far the biggest weakness on their team. And look, McCord's going to let it rip one way or the other. He might come out in this game and throw 5 interceptions, and that'll be it, but he's going to let it fly, right? We've seen it all season, and I think, the big thing, I think you mentioned it right, you have to protect him. We saw this at Ohio State last year. When he's protected, he's really darn good, and boy, I just keep thinking about that starting 4. That starting 4 for Miami that we got to see in that Louisville game. Bain, Barron, Barrow, and Mesidor. That is an NFL defensive line. And I'll tell you what, you mentioned that 40% pressure rate. Anytime I see a pressure rate sitting around 40% or higher, that's a big number for me. I start to really worry about quarterbacks when you see it in just one game, or if you see it consistently. 40% is the mark where you go, oh, I'm worried about my pass protection. I am. That's the number. Under that, we start getting a little better in the low 30s, about average. And if you get into the lower 20s, you've got really good protection. But 40 is dangerous, and this is an extremely dangerous defensive line. You mentioned it. If they give McCord time, he'll have a chance to make throws down the field, because Miami's coverage has been kind of out of sorts in a lot of games this season. But they need to give him time, or it could get ugly.
And maybe the quick passing game would be important as well, because he get rid of the football very quickly at 2.4 seconds. But he does make some downfield throws when you're going against a guy like Cam Ward as well. So, Dalton, ultimately, will my Syracuse Orange pull off the massive upset and potentially ruin Miami's season, or will the Hurricanes survive and move on to the ACC title game?
There are a lot of factors in this game that looks like it could be a shootout, right? Are these the two leading? You mentioned McCord leading the nation. Is Ward second behind him?
He's close. I don't know if he's...
If you have the nation's two leading passers in the same game, you should get a high-flying game here. And I think that's what we'll get. I think you're still going to see some difficulties from this Miami secondary that has kind of struggled. But I'm going to take Miami in a high-scoring game, 45-31. I think it could very well play out the same as we saw in that Louisville game, which ended, 52-45? That game did. I just think there are flaws on this Miami's defense, but I think their pass rush makes enough plays to disturb McCord. If McCord stays out of the turnovers, then you could really have a ball game here, and a high-flying one at that. But I'll take Miami by 14.
I got Miami 41-28. By the way, it is Kyle McCord number 1 and then Cam Ward number 2 in terms of passing yards so far this year. The two leading passers in college football going head-to-head in this game. I think McCord will do his best to keep the Orange in this one, but I don't think he can outduel who will likely be a Heisman finalist in Cam Ward, or should be a Heisman finalist. He wasn't a Maxwell Award finalist, but should be a Heisman finalist in Cam Ward. I think Cam Ward wins that battle. I think the Hurricanes punch their ticket to the ACC title game and most likely clinch a playoff spot as well with this win. I think this is a big game for Miami, and I think they will end up victorious over the Orange with a 13-point victory. All right. Hey, thanks for watching another episode of the PFF College Football Show. Please make sure you guys subscribe to the channel.
Also, subscribe to PFF Plus at subscribe.pff.com for all of the same data and grades that we use in our show, plus fantasy tools, betting tools, and our mock draft simulator.